Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Where We At. We are here at the Harbourfront and we're gonna come and see Sasha. She's gonna show us her studio, so follow me.
Hi, welcome to my studio. Come on in.
Thank you so much for having us in your studio.
You're very
This is so
welcome.
excited. Could you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. Well, my name is Sasha Shevchenko, and I graduated from OCAD in 2022 now from the sculpture and installation program. And since then, I have been working on my practice and also working with teaching as well. And I am a Ukrainian artist based in Toronto. And so a lot of my work often deals with being a person of diaspora and how we can extend traditional practice or heritage into the present and also begin to propose for the future as well.
So, how has been that transition from graduating from OCAD to the professional world, like to professional practice?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's hard to say when the transition began. Like does it begin at the ceremony? And for me, it felt like the transition started much earlier because aside from doing my degree, I was also trying to apply for shows, to create contacts, even when I was in OCAD. And I believe that was very useful coming out of the program as well. But I think thesis kind of allowed me to begin putting all my stuff together and actually getting a good feel of what my work might look like in a gallery space, what it might look like set up in a professional way. And so that was really like the beginning of the practice that I'm doing now. So thesis was super important for that. And following graduation, there was a year where I had to just kind of live off the fumes of thesis, where because everything happened so quickly, I had to really spend time and think about all of the debris and like the little wisps and the knots that came with thesis and the work that I was doing. And so the first year was quite interesting because I was at home. I had a home studio. I had to then create all these contacts for myself. I had to apply for myself. I no longer had the community to help me with my critiques. It was just me and the voice in my head, basically. And although it was isolating at first, it did get me to be more independent and to like advocate for myself more. So that was a very interesting kind of year. It was a lot of high highs when you get a grant or when you get a show, but a lot of low lows too, because you kind of have only yourself to say if you're on the right path or if you're making the right decisions. So, however, being here at Harbourfront now, I really wanted to apply here. I really wanted to be here. I remember that was like exactly almost a year ago now in February. And coming here, having the space and the equipment, I felt like I could really hit the ground running, and my practice really expanded, and I was able to experiment, and I have storage so I could do, larger works, which is what I'm usually used to. So it still feels like I'm doing a lot of trialing and experimenting, and I'm just trying to kind of really see what I can do with the materials I have and be flexible. So it just feels like right now there's not a lot of expectation, which is really good. And through that and being open to that, which can be very difficult sometimes because you already want to know what you're doing, you already want to figure everything out. I'm beginning to find a practice that feels very authentic to me.
That sounds great. What I find really interesting is, and especially when you go through a school, they don't teach you that, like being taking classes, making connections, networking, but also find opportunities outside of school. So in that way, when you graduate, you already have like a portfolio and you have a resume.
Yeah.
So in that way, like, and in that case, you took the initiative and you look for those opportunities. I remember that also you were working with the Mississauga Arts Council too.
Yeah, that's right.
So that
That's
was
right.
really, I think it amazing of you, like looking those opportunities, but also a parallel with your practice too, and those opportunities like feed your practice, because it's not just any opportunity that you will find as an artist. Like you are curating in a way your path too, and I find it like really inspiring what you've been doing. Can we talk about the amazing thesis that you created? I think that it was really strong and it was beautiful. It has a lot of like cultural aspects, but also I thought that I had a lot of your personality and your signature too. What I found out really amazing is the materiality that you bring into your work too. Do you mind just to talk us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, sure thing. So I believe for thesis it was called Twice Bound, Once Removed, Born Quick, Born Tangled. And it was an iterative installation, meaning that every time it's set up in a different way according to the space. And it had this central mythological character or alter ego whose name was Lusterko, which in Ukrainian means little mirror, kind of like the one your grandma carries in her purse to check up on you every now and then, is my makeup looking good? And she had all of these objects and photographs and various ways of documentation that were kind of satelliting her existence. And so the audience was invited to come in and put all the pieces together to perhaps propose a myth or a story of their own. And at the time, I was really interested in the idea of the origin story. We hold on to origin stories very tightly, especially when we are relocated as immigrants. We want to hold on to each and every fragment that we've carried with us to our new life. But this idea of holding on so tightly, in my opinion, also doesn't allow for innovation. It doesn't allow for new traditions or new interpretations. And I was trying to kind of deal with that and understand that and perhaps propose new ways of creating origin stories. What do origin stories look like for the future? What is it when you just have thread and perhaps a color and just a memory of your grandma? Like, is that also an identity? And I think it is. And so Lusterko was this character that used traditional Ukrainian embroidery, but in a way that was very vulnerable and fragile. So it was covering her entire body, but the stitches were all improvised. So as I was making the work, I had no plan. I had only like certain memories or certain inspirations. And ultimately that costume was turned inside out. So in textile, we often have a side we want to show and we have a side that we want to hide. And I wanted to show the side that we usually hide, where we have the knots, when we get distracted, when we're gossiping with our friends, all these things, I feel is what makes that human tactile experience so powerful. So she was kind of like this, this character that wanted to show that there's a lot at stake here and that we do have the ability to create new origin stories. And so for that thesis show and that year in general, I had this like aha moment where there's no such thing as a static origin story. It's not placed in a book and you close that book. Whenever you're making something new, there's an origin story right there because something just started in that moment. And so that was really powerful, especially during that time where my critique, I remember, fell on February 24th, the day of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And although it was so difficult, having that truth that we can always start again, we can always make something new, was my own little act of resistance.
I want to see some work.
Yes, so let's do it.
Let's check it out. Which work is this one? And please tell us what it's about.
Sure, of course. I'm actually in the process of packing for a show I have in Nevada. So I'm leaving this week and I'm just preparing, I think it's like 120 bottle tails that are waiting for their bottle friends in the States now. But the bottles were something that I started working on in thesis. They were, again, like satellite kind of objects to Lusterko, the main character. And at the time, I did not know what they might be, but very quickly it came to be like Molotov cocktails, just given the context and also the kind of rebellious nature of the work. And so I keep working with that. And these bottles always live in different installations. And depending on the space, they also mold to that space and they begin becoming kind of human themselves. So they might be leaning, they might be falling. Sometimes you have thread that's supporting the other. So I really wanted this object that's seen as like rebellion and resistance, but to also show the human aspect of what those actions might be or what that initiative might take, right? And the wins and the gains, but also the losses and the suffering and the grief, but all expressed through just this very simple imagery of the bottle and the textile. So yeah.
It's really powerful. Mm-hmm. And the other thing it is the correlations that it has with the entire installation that are Ukrainian in pieces. And I think it is really important as an artist having these conversations and opening to questions and to experiences of other people and what other people can include in their work in
Absolutely.
themselves, but also bring into the conversation.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
something really powerful that I think your practice does, and
Thank you.
I'm really amazed.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. That's what we work for. You know, I could be in the studio for a year or 6 months and not get any feedback, but then once the show is installed, that's where the work actually happens, right? Because that's where it meets the viewer and what they carry and what they choose to also bring to the space.
This is another beautiful work. Would you mind to tell us what it's about and what is the name and like what is the theme and how did you go from the bottles and from your character to here? So.
Yes, these are very exciting because they are just still trials. I am kind of building up my own alphabet or my own getting to know what my abilities might be in this sort of medium. And so I've continued working with embroidery ever since Lusterco. And I'm actually very interested in the idea of making embroidery move. Because again, going back to the idea that diasporic people often hold on very tightly to their traditions, embroidery or textile work in general can be a very static thing and beautiful in that sense because it has its own presence. But things like embroidery are seldom seen as things that are changing and are fluid. And so I kind of wanted to really expand on that and to go past what textile might be able to do. And so this embroidery is actually only starts on one within the fabric, but then it has this tension and is continued and is loose and is wrapped around the canvas. So it's never actually complete. It can always come undone. And there is this like fragility about that, but that's something I find very exciting. And so the idea here is to work with color and to work with pattern that stems from my studies in Ukrainian symbolism and traditional kind of motifs, but they kind of tend to grow from there, and it's as if they're becoming smeared or lost in motion and what that might look like and what that makes us feel. Because embroidery is highly meditative. It's something that always brought me to a space of empathy and consideration and history as well. You know, I felt very connected to women in my family, for example, who also embroider. But the beautiful thing about embroidery is that you can never tell where a stitch started and where it ended. And I find that very interesting, that interaction. And so for this kind of technique, you know, I'm putting the stitches out there, but where they end up or who they will meet is kind of up to the piece. And so I'm kind of extending the motifs for the future in a way. And I'm working with colors that are quite contained right now, but they're also kind of inspired by certain mythologies and kind of modern stories that are arising from the Chernobyl area. Because I grew up near Chernobyl, I'm kind of intertwined with the kind of modern legacy of that tragedy, but also there's a lot of interesting, mysterious things going on there. And I think it's a very interesting charged space. So I'm kind of trying to sit with that as well and research it. But these are very exciting.
That's really interesting. What I find out like really intriguing, what I find out amazing is the connections that you do with the act of stitching and how it has its own life, but also you bring in those memories and that life from the cultural aspect, from the materiality, from the act of creating these pieces. And I find it really interesting. So since these are explorations, so what do you think that I will go through? And what do you think, what would you expand on?
Yeah, great question. So I'm still working on kind of the vocabulary. I'm taking different motifs and some spread over the canvas, some are more isolated. And the idea with the next couple of months is to keep building up and using the same material, keeping the kind of decisions very limited for me to really experiment. But the goal here is to do large scale pieces because I want individuals to get kind of lost in that motion and to get this like vertigo feeling of like, where is this going? How are these motifs evolving? And entering that field color space is really important to me. And interestingly, also the fabric that is being used is actually landscaping fabric. It's what gardeners put on top of spaces where they do not want any growth in the winter, or you know, when you don't want weeds growing. So the idea that something is growing out of that fabric on purpose, I find just very kind of funny, but also as another way of resistance. Something will always sprout. No matter where it is, something will always sprout. So I'm keeping up with that theme, and I'm really excited to see
I want to thank you for having us and for showing your studio and your practice. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Sasha. So for the audience, would you like to tell us where they can find you, your social media, in case they have questions, they can contact you? So
absolutely. And again, Louise, thank you so much for just stopping by. I had so much fun. If you have any questions or want to reach out, you can find me on Instagram at Lusterco. And also you can hop on my website at sashashevchenko.com.
Yeah, I will post just down. You will see all the information. And thank you so much for watching. Again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We will see you in the next episode.
Yeah, take care.
You.
Bye.
Bye.